Hello everybody, this is the fake Strand and we are in Chicago. Yes, we are in Chicago. That means we are going to have to talk about the thing that Chicago is famous for. We're going to talk about things you assert with Chicago. We're going to talk about costume dramas, British costume dramas indeed, and the attempts to make the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy. This is the title, by the way. Is it a cock and ball story or is it Tristram Shandy? For me, I'm calling this one Tristram Shandy. Let's go! The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy was a series of books that was published in the 18th century and was for a long time deemed unfilmable. It was said to be impossible to do the story properly, and it was impossible to, get the entire scope of the entire thing. I'm not personally familiar with the source material, so I don't know whether or not that is true. Michael Winterbottom, however, took offense to that and said, "Nah, I can do it. I can make Tristram Shandy. I'm going to make a movie that proves that you can make Tristram Shandy by stating that you can't make Tristram Shandy into a movie." That's exactly what he did. This is basically a movie about the making of Tristram Shandy, which proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that you cannot make Tristram Shandy into a movie. Great! That is absolutely sublimely great. Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan, they play themselves, and they also play the characters in the movie while they're shooting the movie. So we can basically get a peek behind the curtain on how it is to make a British costume drama, sort of 2006-2007. If you would call this movie Spinal Tap meets Barry Lyndon, you would not be entirely wrong. You would, however, not be entirely right either. I will get to why I think Spinal Tap is the better movie and the better concept later, and I'm also going to explain why this is not the perfect movie it almost could have been. It is so close. It is so close. Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan, they are amazing together. They are fantastic. Their chemistry is off the wall. When you have these sequences where they sit down, in makeup, and they're just talking about nothing. It is generally the funniest sequence in the entire movie. Their chemistry is so good, they're so funny, they're just hilarious. If they only could have had, a channel where they could, explore that marvelous chemistry they have together and their comedic timing. Nudge, nudge. This movie is filled with hilarious sequences, with surreal sequences, with generally haunting sequences, especially in the battle sequences in the end of the movie, which has almost a found footage feel to the entire thing. The movie is filled with sequences that isn't exactly laugh out loud material. It is more of you're sitting and that's kind of funny. There are a couple of sequences that are generally hilarious. I love movies about making movies, peeking behind the curtain, seeing stuff that goes on. But I would have liked to see that more. I would have liked to see this movie more going into, blow up on sets, props malfunctioning. I want to see more arguing between Coogan and Brydon, because Coogan has this enormous Napoleon complex, which he always wants to be the center of the movie. Because he is Tristram Shandy and he is the star of this movie, not Rob Brydon. He wants to insert himself in more scenes. He wants to have shoes that makes him appear taller than Rob Brydon, although it will mock up the entirety of the continuity. But who cares? Hero's gonna be hero. I would have liked to see more of that stuff. The thing, if you compare this one to Spinal Tap, which you can absolutely do, why that movie worked so well is because you generally felt bad for Spinal Tap when they started to go on a losing streak. I felt bad when bad stuff happened to them. It was laughter mixed with a sort of sadness. No, please don't do that, and stuff like that. And I never got that feeling because the movie is a little bit too distant to itself. And also the fact is that Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan plays themselves makes me, realize that I never bought the fact that they were if they would have played some other actors, then you probably would have been invested. I wonder what's going to happen to John Richardson, who's played by Steve Coogan or something like that. Then he would have he would have played another actor who would play Tristram Shandy. In that case, you could have felt that there was actually stakes for him in this movie. Now it's just Steve Coogan playing Steve Coogan. I also feel that the movie is a little too afraid to go into more slapstick and more wacky stuff, because this movie feels like it wants to be the really intellectual British comedy. And I think if Michael Winterbottom just would allow himself to be a little bit more loose with his comedy, I think this movie would have been one of the greatest comedies of all time. It still would have been one of the smartest and one of the most brilliant comedies of all time. It wouldn't have chipped away anything from its intellectual pillar which it stands on, because it is still a movie about making a movie that cannot be made, making the movie about it and stating that it can't be made. It is brilliant. To me, this is a flawed masterpiece. It's almost fantastic. I mean, it's great acting, it's great writing, it is great setups. There are sequences that are generally hilarious, and there are sequences that are generally so incredibly silly that you think to yourself, am I actually watching this? However, these sequences get fewer and fewer the longer we grow into the movie. And you're starting to get a little bit bored in the middle of the movie. Nothing really happens, and there are not... The sequences that are generally funny is reduced to not being that many. And then sort of the movie just ends. There is, however, all of these incredible little subtle things Michael Winterbottom throws in. He has this sequence just in the middle of the movie where you have a carriage being driven by horses, and you have where they play the actual music from Barry Lyndon in a sequence that could have been ripped straight out of the super masterpiece Barry Lyndon. Now, in my opinion, whether or not you should see this movie or not is depending on a little bit what mood you are in. I would think you would fall into one of three categories. One, you would think this is one of the smartest, brilliant and most clever comedies of all time. Two, you would think this is a really clever comedy that takes itself a little bit too serious and cannot really have fun with itself enough to really function as a full-out comedy, but you will still like it. My opinion. Three, you would think that this is boring as hell and you want to strangle yourself. I really like this movie. I thought this movie could have been one of the greatest of all time. With a small adjustments, this could have easily been a top 90 rating movie. However, I am still giving this one, for all the great acting, the great writing, the rating of 70. It is worth it through and through. This is a solid movie. It just could have been a little bit better, and it could have had a little bit more fun with itself. I think this is actually the first time I have shot a review in a big city, and I think it was kind of fun and energetic to do it. So, Chicago, we won't be here for so long, and I don't have that many more reviews to do while I'm here. But until next time, this is the Vikstrand signing out.